I'm Chris Dwan. I think I am probably the least scientific or biological person in the room. When asked by sort of non-professional colleagues what I do, I describe myself as a data plumber. For about the last 20 years, I've been in and around the life sciences, sort of trying to keep up with the data output of merely reading genomes, which has been fun and exciting. Nancy and I worked together at the New York Genome Center, and most recently I was with the Broad Institute, who just passed their 100,000th genome read, which is about 13 petabytes of data. And what I'm here to share is a vision for information technology in this collaboration, which is that hopefully our challenges of scale will not come from the IT side of the house. I heard a lot of challenges in scaling the biological and the synthesis side. And I actually am very, very optimistic that we can get out far enough in front of the information technology that we are not blocked and held up and constantly surprised by technology blockages. So this is a picture of a Cray 2 supercomputer. It pulled about 200 kilowatts. It was liquid cooled. It was the fastest machine in the world until 1990. It has approximately the computing power of an iPhone. So when I say later in the talk that things change rapidly in my field, this is what I'm talking about. We have experience from the Human Genome Project, from TCGA, from HapMap, from ENCODE. Now the Human Cell Atlas is making great pronouncements. Every single time, getting out in front of what information technology can do is a really good idea and is transformational. And also every single time, there are unexpected challenges and expenses and roadblocks because we are always pushing the ability of computers to do what we need them to do. I heard some casual comments from the technology working group about simulating the protein expression and repression and synthesis and everything in one cell or perhaps many cells and tweaking. That's like supercomputing challenges that are at the edge of human capability today. You know, and it's casually thrown out as one of the many things we're going to have to do. So this is a picture of 100 gigabit per second uplink. If you're using the Wi-Fi, that's between 10 and 100 megabits per second. But we have the infrastructure now to move data around at great velocity. And I think actually in terms of technologies that we will be making use of in this project, one of the biggest ones, one of the ones that's having a breakthrough right now is machine learning or artificial intelligence, if you have to use that term. There are lots and lots of real-world examples of algorithms that are uncovering insights in large corpuses of data that humans just wouldn't have been able to find, either at that speed or at all. My messages on that are that domain expertise still matters. Garbage in, garbage out is still a thing. And there's no such thing as a free lunch with machine learning. If you have data that is skewed and incomparable from some basic statistical perspectives, running it through a convolutional neural net or one of the Google or NVIDIA kits will not actually just fix that. So there's a discipline and a rigor still needed to use machine learning techniques. Similarly with blockchain, which is one of the most incredibly hyped technologies I've ever seen. The core of blockchain is that it enables groups to interact with sensitive data without deciding on a central source of authority. We don't have to decide who's holding the books. We don't have to decide who keeps the ledger, right? And that's really, really empowering, particularly on these questions of multinational collaborations where we'd like to set up rules, but no one even nation state gets to make all the rules. It does not change everything. And in fact, if you come up to it, I was in presentations just yesterday with folks who were doing things like taking the point where the dollar moves around in a system and just replacing it with a cryptocurrency. We're not going to do that here. That doesn't change, that's not the fundamental change here. The most important technology I think that we have, that we didn't have even like 5 years ago, is we've gotten a lot better as technologists, information technologists, software people, computational biologists. We've gotten a lot better at building large-scale, robust, high-quality software artifacts for science. We're still not It's still not easy, it's still not the default, and it's particularly challenging in academic labs that don't have necessarily the business or the engineering discipline. It's not the job, right, of a biology department to run a world-class software org. But I feel like we, on this collaboration, will be able to bring a lot of the DevOps and the site reliability engineering and the agile design principles to move things more rapidly. So the challenges. 15 years ago, I took a picture of a couple of gigabyte disk that was going to be FedExed from lab to deliver data. So this was taken last month. Now it's a 6 terabyte disk. We're using FedEx to deliver data back and forth. I would choose to not do this if we get to pick. I think one of the big challenges that we will have in this collaboration is the question of identity and authorization. Particularly over a decade, companies move, they're purchased, people move from institution to institution. We are all of us humans, which means that we are, both participants and potentially administrators and potentially researchers. It's easy to get lost in a sea of passwords. And we heard the ethics group speak about the importance of being able to accurately trace who did what and who knew what when. Information security and privacy are a critical thing. And over time, data will have gravity, and we will be pulled in interesting technology directions based on choices we're making now. These are all, we will be in a multi-cloud environment. It's not the case that all of the data will be all in one place at once. So with that, I would like to thank the working group. We've been meeting, as everybody, about twice a month, and I would invite Brian and Jake, if you're out there, to come on up. I am very, very interested. This was a very rapid and high-level conversation, not least because we haven't actually hit, I think, the information technology challenges and potential of this collaboration. So I'm very, very interested to hear from you folks what you would like from us tech people. And I'll actually just kick that off. Brian, if I could ask you, if we could ask these folks to do a thing to make life easier from the IT and information management perspective in the future, what would it be?
Well, one of the most important things would be write better software, please. Keep it well maintained, keep it version controlled, write comments. If someone is leaving a lab group, make sure that you do like an exit interview with them on the software artifacts they've produced. That's really important for making sure that projects can continue to function even after they leave.
I'm going to take a slightly different perspective and say that I think that we can't ask academic labs to write and maintain good software. The thing I would ask instead is I think that as we are writing proposals in this, I think that it's really tempting to be entirely focused on the lab part and on the academic software part. But I think that if we can start putting in sort of a slice into every one about infrastructure, integration, and sustainability. Some of you folks may know BBN, some may not. We're a computer science research company which stands sort of in that midway awkward and uncomfortable point between academia and normal industry. We do a lot of work with academic groups in essentially being the integrator between a bunch of, the grad students go racing off into the stratosphere as they should, and somebody's got to be able to figure out how to fit together the things that are happening at the different labs. Right now I'm involved in, there's a big DARPA program running called SD2, which is for synergistic discovery and design, and their whole idea and mission in this program is to try and bring together high throughput laboratory work with big data, ML, AI, cloud capabilities. And the huge challenge that we've been working through in there is the integration of how do you make sure that the labs are gathering data with controls and enough information about what is the experiment that was even done that's not captured just in a lab notebook. Because if you want to bring these tools to bear, and if you want to have things not essentially with one organization and a bunch of satellites, but if you want to really have a federated network, you have got to have a much higher standard of curation, and you've got to have that not be the jobs of grad students and postdocs, because that's the wrong thing for those people to be doing for their science and their career. You've got to have partners involved who can help enable that to happen smoothly. The last thing I'll say there is that the absolutely most important thing in working with a lab, there's, my people, the computer scientists, got a very bad reputation in synthetic biology early on by showing up and saying, oh yeah, we can solve that for you, without listening. Over the past decade of my own work in deep partnership with a number of labs, usually things are the way they are in a biolab for a really good reason. And if you're going to have the IT complement the bio work that's going on, you've really got to get the software folks in there listening and understanding and fitting the software to the processes that work, rather than trying to give everybody a magic pipette that talks Bluetooth or something.
I would add to that, one of my favorite numbers is that when we started the Human Genome Project, started the budgeting, we estimated 3% of the budget for information technology data management software. And at the end, I believe the total was about 30%. And so as we look at a plan for how much effort will go into information technology, data management software, I think a third is a reasonable estimate, just by weight, by dollar. I'm very interested in questions. What do you folks hear? What are you concerned about? How can we help? Are you just hungry? I'm going to defer that to the leadership group. Oh, I think it's actually completely fair to, I heard, I think Jeff say, what part of the expectation at this point in the collaboration is that people go and find ways to support themselves. And I think the ask that we just heard was, it was two very different ways to say the same thing, is please consider the next person in those asks. Please go ahead and build things that are reusable and portable and, appropriately consented, and have considerations for intellectual property. I think that right now that's an ask back to the community.
So you just asked everyone to build their own thing, but make sure it's compatible. But at the same time, there's this core that we just talked about the budget for. And which one should it be? Should it be a central system where it's a core for every lab that is GP Write approved and everyone collaborates with them? Or should it be everyone building their own thing and then bringing it back into the fold at some point?
So I am the leader of the standards working group, and I have a very strong opinion on that. I think that centralized systems are going to be completely unworkable for a project that is this big and this international. But one of the big advances that has happened over the last decade in the IT world is a huge leap forward in the ability to build federated systems. Federated systems means that you do not have centralized systems. You don't have to trust the other people. You don't have to give them authority over you, but you put agreements on the ways in which you share data into the technology, so humans don't have to be intermediating that, and you can have a group of federated systems work transparently for a collection of unlike organizations. Different people, in fact, may have different perspectives given the rights, permissions, roles that they have. There's actually a huge amount of investment that's been done into this by the government for completely unrelated reasons in recent years to enable sharing between organizations, both nationally and internationally, that have a lot of data that they need to share but do not trust one another. And so, we actually have a much easier problem than some of the things that have already been dealt with there. So I think importing and integrating these types of technologies, especially early on, will enable us to have a network without having to either A, centralize everything in one spot. We don't have to build bio-Facebook. And B, if we do this right, and with a basis of the right type of underpinning technology and standards, then this is going to be an evolvable system, because the IT infrastructure that we need is going to be a rapidly moving target also.
So Jake, that's very interesting about the federated systems. Can you give us a practical example of exactly how that works? It doesn't have to be anything to do with DNA, but just something to help us get our heads around two parties or more that are working together on a common goal, but they have sort of a defined list of responsibilities that are highly detailed and technical in nature. How does that work?
So let's say I have two government agencies that both collect information. They're very jealous about the information they collect, but they have a specific mission that they need to cooperate on. So they create essentially a mission-specific set of groups and permissions. They add in a set of rules that they negotiate between them about what permissions will be allowed for any mission-specific data that exits Agency 1 and becomes accessible to Agency 2. They then push those into their IT systems, which can then essentially look at the metadata tagging on data in order to decide which things are allowed to cross the barrier and which aren't. Similarly, Agency 2 may send queries to Agency 1, which are then processed within the rules of Agency 1, which Agency 1 might not even fully expose. So this is a simple example of the type of permission, sort of dynamic permission-based things. Now there are much simpler federations that can happen as well when you've got things that are open. So for example, in the SBAL community right now, there's the synthetic biology open language, which we use for representation. The SynBio Hub design and metadata repositories can simply share their indices with one another, so that if you query one, you can also pass queries to others and do a joint query across a set of public databases that all know about one another and essentially share some degree of indexing data. I also want to add one more really important note, which is that, and this is something that comes up in over and over again, not just in these biospaces, but other spaces as well. There's a massive distinction between metadata and data. Data is very, very heavyweight. Usually comes with its own standards. That's the thing you ship in a drive. Metadata is much, much harder to get right, and helps you understand which of those terabytes are the ones that are useful. Metadata is the place where I think we want to invest, and invest early, and invest flexibly. We don't want to come up with like the metadata standard. We want something that's adjustable. And another thing that, this is a very strong lesson that we've been learning in the SD2 program, is that we want to have backfitting metadata onto things that got done before we knew how to represent them is one of the standard working cases that will need to be supported throughout this. So think about it this way. We're going to have some things that are being done in sort of a production scale, like the way a lot of stuff is working in SC 2.0 right now. Things have gotten worked out, the pilots are done, you can operate in production, you've got all the processes there. But also there are things that are going to be done at a pilot level. You don't want to go through the whole metadata investment when you're just stitching together those chromosomes for the first time into one megachromosome and seeing if it's even sane. So we're going to have a lot of pilots that then work, and we don't want to throw that data away. We're going to need to make sure we have a good process that's more organizational than IT, but with some IT to support it, for essentially backfitting good curation metadata onto experimental data that has been gathered in advance of systematization.
Reproducibility of the data. We cannot think of developing a method that we want to engineer an entire mammalian genome with some scrappy script and just say, okay, that's good. Then I will call a software engineer to make it beautiful and with classes and everything. I think one of the goals should be that all the computational scientists, also the biologists, should realize how important it is to have from the get-go very good software and very good code just for the sake of having data generated that are reproducible. Not just by me that I know how to tweak my script to work well, but for whoever has a low to average knowledge of computer science or computational stuff. So that's, I think there's a lot of emphasis right now in the community to write good software, not just for the sake of it, but for the sake of having reproducible data. I think this should be one of our main goals.
I absolutely agree. One of the transformations that I've seen in the past 15 years is from the idea that the manuscript was the product and the data and software artifacts were sort of accidents that stayed in the lab, to a world where the data and software are the product and the manuscripts are mileposts along the way. But really, the fundamental
Both
thing...
of them are products.
Yeah, but they are both, and they have equal dignity, and so I couldn't agree more.
I do want to note, though, that I think one of the things we have to recognize is this is an inherently cross-disciplinary environment, and we are all highly ignorant of some of the other critical disciplines that are going to be in here. You know, my organic chemistry is really weak, and I expect that somebody who's an amazing organic chemist, you know, may not be very skilled in agile software design. One of the things that those of us from the IT side can potentially do is help support easy adoption of some of the low-hanging fruit. For example, there is no reason in the world that you know, people shouldn't be able to adopt continuous integration and testing infrastructures. That's something that makes your life easier, even if you're the grad student, because you got to test your code anyway. You might as well do it so that it, you know, maintains. But some of the more sophisticated things, we don't want to try to make you know, people who are not software engineers into software engineers if their expertise is best focused somewhere else. We want to embrace the cross-disciplinarity and figure out collaborations to be able to support.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, everybody. We've gotten the signal to end, so thank you very much.